CountryWide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lampp.
We have got Daniel Ebb, who is the Deputy Leader of the Opportunities Party. Daniel, g'day, mate. Welcome to the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Okay, so the Opportunities Party used to be called TOP, right? Or it's now just called Opportunities.
It's actually just called Opportunity, singular.
Right.
Yeah. We did what Facebook did back in like 2010 and dropped the and just became Opportunity.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So what was the idea behind that?
Top kind of didn't vibe as well. It sounds a little bit sort of, we know best, which has actually been a fair criticism of the party before. We've sort of been all policy, no heart. And so we wanted to go through a new phase of the party where we talk a little bit more like to Kiwis, the way Kiwis like to be talked to, which is mostly around a barbecue and less sort of policy wonky stuff. And so, yeah, sat in with a rebrand, sat in with a new leader, Kulei Wong, who's doing an awesome job. And yeah, we're a new, sort of fit for purpose party contesting the election come November 7.
Okay, so where does Opportunity see themselves in the political spectrum then?
Yeah, good question. We're a centrist party. We think of ourselves as, our colour is teal, so we think of ourselves as a combination between blue and green. So a really strong sense of supporting particularly small business, supporting innovation, but with very strong environmental values and principles at the core of those decisions. So we're a blue-green party, but I think our strongest sort of spectrum value add is that we can actually work constructively with both the left and right of politics. We fundamentally believe that this flip-flop between left and right and the cancellation of policies and the undoing of millions of dollars of work every election cycle is fundamentally destructive, and it's not moving us forward. So what we want to do is be a political force of stability and compromise that can basically sit down with Labour and National and say, hey guys, we actually do need a 30-year infrastructure plan. We actually do need something like a food system strategy. Let's plan for the long haul and stop undoing each other's work.
Interesting. While the news was on, I was reading an article about Audrey Young in the Herald talking about potentially what would a grand coalition look like between National and Labour, which is talked about quite a lot, a kind of a purple party, effectively, I suppose is what we're talking about. What's your take on something like that? Where do you think that would fit?
Yeah, no, we'd support that kind of policy making, and that is what happens in a lot of particularly European countries, is that the centre actually has to sort of coalesce together, because realistically, the solutions for our problems are not going to come all from the left of politics and not come all from the right of politics. We have to pick and choose the best policies that fit our geography, our culture, our values, our business models. And right now, what we've sort of fallen into is an inability to craft long-term plans and stick to them, which is like Progress 101. And so something like a grand coalition would be great. If Labour and National could get together, that probably cuts our lunch a bit, but it would be good for the country. And failing that, we believe we can be a force that can actually do that and bring them together and maybe sort of be the spark to something like a grand coalition.
So what does a top voter look like? What's your constituent? Who is that person?
Yeah. It's no secret that we sort of do best with like younger families, particularly urban Kiwis. Often they are kind of just starting out in life, and they're me and Kulei. So I'm mid to late 30s, bought our home a couple of years ago, absolutely busted a gut in order to get on the ladder. And every single barbecue I went to with my friends prior to that, we'd have the same conversation, which is, how do we actually get a home? How do we get security and stability? How do I get funding for a business that I want to start? And so our voter is this group of Kiwis who want us to move forward faster and are kind of sick of some of the older systems that are like locking up all our capital into housing, or the fact that we haven't got an innovation network that's really going to get behind younger, innovative Kiwis and take us to the next step. We kind of feel like New Zealand's a little bit broken right now. Like we've kind of sort of calcified into old systems that may have worked really, really well in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but just aren't really fit for purpose anymore. So that sort of disenfranchised, particularly urban Kiwi, is our core demo.
Interesting. Like I've always been interested in opportunities policies. I've always found, though, your sort of tax economic policy, and that's probably my age effectively, and I'm probably the perfect one that you're talking about here, has put me off supporting the party because of that. And I've always thought that your policies were, this is personally speaking here, that sort of stuff was kind of a little bit wonky, and I've never fully, is that a valid criticism?
Totally valid, yeah. Like talking about tax is actually really hard. We're not very good at it as Kiwis, and what we have done in the past is sort of used a lot of facts and figures and numbers and said, oh, the data points to this direction, let's just go. That's not how people often make decisions. We actually have to kind of talk about the benefits of it. So we'll be releasing our tax policy shortly, and very briefly, that basically introduces two mechanisms. One is a citizen's income, which is basically a guaranteed income so that no Kiwi gets left behind, that everyone can actually get the basics they need to start a family, maybe start a business, retrain if they need to. So it's sort of this guaranteed security for everyone. And it also introduces a land value tax, which finally breaks our addiction to high house prices and actually sort of incentivizes a productive economy instead of an economy built on like owning more and more property, which isn't really going to get us where we need to go. So yeah, bold stuff. We don't shy away from that. And it's still going to be a big part of our policy platform going forward. Yeah.
What do you then make of, I think you've seen it, I talked about this poll, and talking about agriculture here, because I think you are the agricultural spokesperson.
Sure I am.
So what do you make of this debate that's going on at the moment about importing products into New Zealand from lower welfare standards, particularly this poll, which I talked about at the start of the show, 79 or 80% of farmers, and this is 1,000 farmers. This is a Curia poll. This is a proper poll here. Yep. It's not a Facebook poll, one of those stupid ones. Support imported animal products meeting New Zealand welfare standards. 78% farmers should not be undercut by lower standard imports. What do you make of that?
Sure. So party hasn't got a position on that just yet. We're still working on it, but I can talk you through sort of the process of how we would make a position on this. It's a tricky one, right? It's really tricky. On the face of it, you think, oh, this is a question about fairness and protecting New Zealand producers. Who can be against that? Let's just do it. But then on the other hand, you do have to weigh up the fact that this is the entire food and farming sector is built on good solid trade relationships, and the threshold for making sort of tutus and changes to our import restrictions is probably a lot higher for a small country like New Zealand that doesn't have influence. So we need to really understand what the unintended consequences of any kind of blanket restrictions on imports would look like. But I think there's a sort of bigger system issue here. This is a flashpoint, but it's come about as a system, as sort of a system issue, and it is reflective of the kind of free trade agreements that we've been building in the last couple of years, which have sort of pushed us in the right direction, but it talks to a need to design a new generation sort of free trade agreements 2.0, if you like, that gives us the opportunity to actually build sort of high ethical value, high ethics, high value trading blocks with our partners around the world to negate this issue. Let's do what we can, use the influence we have to lift the global floor on animal welfare, as opposed to putting blanket restrictions on. And the last point I'll make is this is a symptom of the fact that we don't have something like a national food strategy, that we don't have a forum where health experts, cost of living advocates, independent producers, larger agricultural representatives, ecologists can sit down and actually work through some issues like this constructively. And because we haven't got the ability to actually design really, really, really good policy that reflects that broad set of viewpoints, we get kind of what we've got with like the live export ban, where Labour gets lobbied by animal welfare, they overturn the ban, National gets lobbied by industry, they in this case overturn the ban, and we get this flip flopping. And I can tell you that the thing that is more detrimental to producers, in this case particularly the pork producers, than the status quo of poor standard imports is regulatory uncertainty. So we're feeling the pain of a poorly designed political system in yet another sort of individual flashpoint, in this case, food imports.
Yeah, it was interesting, that interview I played with Steve Abel and his Animal Products Closing the Welfare Gap Amendment Bill. In that interview, he talked about banning animal welfare products animal products or food from countries with lower animal welfare standards. You don't have to ban the country. There are products in those companies when it comes to pork, say in America, where they do have ethical pork. So we can still produce or import that. It's just that it's more expensive, effectively, right? So this comes back to a cost thing, doesn't it? Cost of welfare, cost of living, animal welfare produces lower quality, cheaper food, but we're making that choice based on our bottom line, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pressure you can't take away from this argument. Like, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and this is the tensions and trade-offs that we actually have to surface. We can't just keep relying on lobbyists to throw their perspectives at government. We actually need government to listen to both, a guy like David Latelli, who's living food insecurity every single day through his work, as well as the pork board. Like, we have to find a way to balance those two perspectives. And until we have a mechanism to actually do that, particularly in food and farming, we're going to keep getting this kind of, not extreme views. I wouldn't consider those views extreme, but that sort of inability to find the middle ground and actually design good policy.
Yeah.
It's not an easy one. And so we actually have to build mechanisms to help us make, smart, complex policies that understand the trade-offs.
Yeah, Helen Beatty calls them wicked problems, and that's effectively what they are. They are wicked problems, and like, you've got to have a lot of sympathy for pork farmers and poultry as well, being held to higher standards, which costs them a lot of money, and then we welcomely bring in the same product that competes with them at a lower price. And the consumer goes, thank you very much, and because pork, we all know pork is a relatively cheap form of protein, and so is chicken. So it is very difficult. All right. Hey, before I let you go, a couple of policies: Productivity Unleashed and Healthy Land. What are these? These are ag policies. Just quickly, what are both of those?
So Healthy Land is it's kind of an all-encompassing policy package that allows us to both talk to the kind of nature-positive farming innovation that we want to see in our food-producing areas. So this is stuff like creating a biodiversity market so that farmers get paid to do conservation. It's wrapped up in our tax policy as well. We're building a tax policy that actually means that if you create more private conservation land on your farm, you'll actually see a slightly lower tax bill. So we're creating the right kind of incentives to continue this shift towards farming a little bit more in partnership with nature. Lowering pesticide use, being really smart about when and how we use artificial fertilizer. So we're creating a broader system that incentivizes that shift. And then on the Productivity Unleashed side, that's basically saying we are a big time science party. We think our future lies at a minimum upping our investment in public R&D to 2%. That's still below the OECD average, but it's up from 1.5%, which is our number right now. Basically, we have underinvested in science for a long, long time, and this sector in particular stands on the shoulders of some awesome research that was done in yesteryear, and really we haven't followed through on the promise of what a really strong science sector could look like. And so agri-innovation sits right at the forefront of basically let's overinvest in science play, which is basically what the Productivity Unleashed policy talks to.
Okay, well, on science then, do you have a policy on gene tech?
We do. It is again, it represents the fact that there can be two very valid arguments in this particular issue. Our policy, as it stands, is to not support the gene tech bill that's currently proposed in Parliament. It's poorly designed. It doesn't actually create that kind of forum that listens to every perspective and viewpoint. And we're gonna fall into the same kind of position that we have with so many other bills, where because it's come from the right, the left is going to disagree with it and burn it down, only for it to re-emerge next time there's a right of centre coalition. That's not how you develop a smart, long-standing policy around gene technology. In general, we support the fact that the framework needs to be modernized. This is a 25-year-old framework that technology has moved on, and those farmers and organizations that want to use particularly gene editing, we do make a clear distinction between genetic modification and gene editing, particularly gene editing technology to do things like stop cloudy dieback, stop things like wildling pines, to use it for predator control, and in some circumstances to use it in food production. We think there needs to be a framework to enable that choice. At the same time, we also need to build a framework that means that organic farmers who are investing in that kind of industry, and it's a growing industry, are protected from some of the liability considerations from some of the harm that could be done to their business model. It's a super, super tricky issue, but we think there is a middle ground here if we build a forum that means that we can actually hear from all sides, not just each side lobbying each side of government, because that's going to take us nowhere.
All right. Hey, Daniel, fascinating chat. Really appreciate you jumping in a little bit earlier for us on the show and having a bit of an extended chat about this. Really appreciate it. We will talk more. Always great to get your view and some really fascinating insights there into opportunity. It's going to be a good one to follow. And I see you are registering almost slightly out of the margin of error, which is always a good place to be, right?
Yeah, 3.3% in the last One News Varian poll, and we've had two polls at 4% as well. So right. We're coming.
Well, you're pretty confident,
mate. I wouldn't have chucked in a year of my life if I wasn't confident on it. I think the time is now. People are getting fed up with a system that's just not delivering, and we need a fresh, young voice in Parliament that's actually going to bring the left and the right together, because we can't keep flip-flopping and wasting time like we are.
No, 100%. There's a lot of people that are thinking the same way, and that's why, talking about this Grand Coalition, I think, is gaining a little bit of traction. Can't see it happening, but it will be a fascinating one to follow. Daniel, really appreciate your time, mate. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again.
No stress. Cheers.
All right, Daniel Ebb there, Deputy Leader of Opportunity.
CountryWide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lampp.